Test.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We have 7 o'clock. Could everybody please stand? We'll call the regular city council meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. Madam Clerk, if you could please call the roll.
Here.
Ms. Hammond? Here.
Mr. Grace, could you see if IT can?
Mr. Kittle?
Here.
Mr. Knight?
Henry.
Mr. Knight? Ms.
I haven't got my
Mitchell?
computer up, but I'm here.
Present.
Ms. Verbecki?
Here.
Mayor McDaniel?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Council, before we move on to the approval of minutes, we're going to remove one item. It's 4C, executive session. Those minutes will be provided for the next meeting, so we'll go ahead and scratch 4C from the agenda. 4A is a regular city council meeting that occurred on October 10th, 2016. If there aren't any corrections, I would be open for a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Verbecki. Do we have support?
Support.
Supported by Mr. Burmeister. Is there any further discussion? We're ready to vote.
Ms. Verbecki?
Yes.
Mr. Burmeister?
Yes.
Ms. Hammond? Yes. Mr. Kittle?
Yes.
Mr. Knight?
Yes,
Ms. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mayor McDaniel?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. 4B is the city council workshop that also occurred on October 10th, 2016. Again, if there aren't any corrections, I'd be open for a motion.
I'll move we approve those minutes of the workshop.
Support.
Moved by Mr. Knight, supported by Ms. Verbecki. Is there any further discussion? We're ready to vote.
Mr. Knight?
Yes,
Ms. Verbecki?
Yes.
Mr. Burmeister?
Yes.
Ms. Hammond? Yes. Mr. Kittle?
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mayor McDaniel?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. There are no appointments and presentations. We'll move on to public comment. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, this portion of the agenda is reserved for anyone in the audience wishing to speak on an item that is not on this evening's agenda. We do ask, as you come through the council chamber doors, that you fill out a public comment form. This just helps ensure that we have accurate information for the minutes and helps facilitate the meeting. At this time, I do not have any public comment forms. However, if you did not get an opportunity to complete one and you still wish to speak, please come forward at this time. Seeing none, we will go ahead and close public comment. Council, we will move on to the consent agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, all items are listed to be considered routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of any of these items unless a council member so requests, in which event that item will be removed from the consent agenda and then considered in its normal sequence. Council, the items for us to consider this evening are the receiving of our boards and commission minutes for the Planning Commission that occurred on October 5th, the Tax Increment Finance Authority that occurred on October 11th, motion to approve the traffic control order and stop signs for Lake in the Hills Mobile Home Park, motion to approve the Tifa parking structure space lease agreement, and approve the membership in Taxpayers for Michigan Constitutional Government. Council is before us for a motion.
Your Honor,
Ms. Mitchell.
I'd like to remove 7D as in David, please.
Okay, 7D. Council, if there aren't any further,
Okay, I'd like 7B, please.
okay. Council, I'd be open for a motion for items 7A and 7C.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Kittle. Do we have support?
Second.
Supported by Ms. Mitchell. We're ready to vote.
Mr. Kittle?
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell?
Yes.
Ms. Verbecki?
Yes.
Mr. Burmeister?
Yes.
Ms. Hammond?
Yes.
Mr. Knight?
Yes.
Mayor McDaniel?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Mr. Knight, 7B, regarding the traffic control order.
Yes, I asked that to remove because I'd like a little brief explanation. We're making these, putting these stop signs on the private property of the trailer park. And I was wondering, I really read in it that there was a homeowners association. I'm wondering, do they own their lots? An association usually is homeowners or something. And in the comments I read, it said the association had approved it and so on. One, I'm wondering about that. The second thing is, these is traffic enforcement things on private property. Are we expected to go in and every once in a while, every day or so on, to enforce their stop signs? I'm not sure how you enforce.
We have Lieutenant Gagnon here, so good evening, Lieutenant, if there's a way that you could address those questions.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Knight, members of council. The neighborhood owns the stop signs. They maintain the stop signs. By law, a private subdivision such as a mobile home park can request through a letter to the police department, to the city, authorization for us to enforce stop sign laws. The laws allow us to create a temporary traffic control order, which we did. Chief Olko signed back in July. We went into what happened was we got a complaint about speed and stop signs, people running the stop signs in the park. We went out and did a survey of the neighborhood. All of the stop signs were compliant as far as the material they're made of and retro-reflective material. However, the heights weren't accurate by law. So we had them raise, they did these themselves, they raised the height to the proper height. I believe they had to remove a tree that was blocking one stop sign, and they requested us to enforce the law here. And part of that process is once that 90-day traffic control order was signed by the chief is to come to council to ask for approval where these would be permanent traffic control orders with the streets listed for stop signs. So we can enforce the law. Prior to that, we cannot write any tickets for violating stop signs. We had no legal right to do that on private property.
So I don't understand the purpose. There's no way to enforce anything. Our police department, I'm glad to hear, is not doing enforcement. Do they have their own roving security that's gonna enforce them?
I'm sorry, by agreeing to this, if council agrees to this as a traffic control order, we can then enforce and write citations in the mobile home park. we will be able to do that. Prior to that, we could not.
Do we do that at Avondale High School where there's stop signs? Do they have to have, particularly have it? I'm just curious, that's a curiosity question.
Yeah, and I believe this is the fourth, don't quote me on it, but I believe this is the fourth and final mobile home park. We've done this in Oakland Estates, Sheffield Estates, and I think after that, all of the mobile home parks will have traffic control orders for those locations.
Lieutenant, he was asking,
Just worried.
Mr. Knight, just to get clarification, he was asking, do we have a traffic control order adopted for the high school, Avondale High School parking lot?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. I'd have to look at that. You know, that stretch of road is their property, but I'd have to look at that.
Just an example. I'm concerned, we have so many, we've been seeing the scope of the department and what they're covering, and I'm afraid, I know we can go in and enforce it. I know we would drive through that subdivision like we will other subdivisions on occasion, and if they only expect when we happen to have a police car in there, that we'll enforce it. But I can see right now being clamored with people from there saying, nobody's enforcing our stop signs and so on. And I'm wondering if this is really a wise thing to do when we're spread so thin. I brought it up for discussion. It's just, we keep adding things.
Mr. Tangi?
Mayor, I mean, the fact that they happen to live in a mobile home, their resident is a resident is a resident is a resident. I mean, I don't really see any difference than any other neighborhood that we would be conducting patrols in. Certainly, the expectation could be, because we have a traffic control order for enforcement now, that they might expect greater patrols. That's really not going to happen. But it does allow us to react to ongoing complaints, just like we do with any traffic enforcement. We have a special unit that actually addresses these kinds of situations, and we would go in and do special enforcement if it were necessary, but it certainly would not create a situation where suddenly we're going to have a car there 24/7. So it'll be the same routine patrols, and it'll allow us to send our directed patrol unit to look at any circumstances where there's a significant amount of abuse, and hopefully educate the residents that are in the park, and just like we would anywhere else.
Thank you, Mr. Tangi.
It seems to be a well-run park, and there's good stuff there. However, in my memory, those were the owners that went in and cut down every tree on a beautiful site to make that thing. And that's just interesting history. I think this is a futility, but I'll support it, but I think that we're just misleading people, because everybody else that's got private property are going to ask for us to do their signs, College Heights, and so on. So I've had my say. I'm very hesitant on this one.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Knight. With that, I'd be open for a motion to approve the traffic control order for the stop signs in Lake in the Hills Mobile Home Park.
But I don't want to make the...
Mr. Mayor? Oh, sorry.
Mr. Kittle?
Move to adopt traffic control order SS-16, creating a traffic control order for the stop signs in Lake in the Hills.
Okay, moved by Mr. Kittle. Do we have support?
Support.
Supported by Ms. Verbecki. Is there any further discussion or comment? We're ready to vote.
Mr. Kittle?
Yes.
Ms. Verbecki?
Yes.
Mr. Burmeister?
Yes.
Ms. Hammond?
Yes.
Mr. Knight?
No.
Ms. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mayor McDaniel?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant. 7D, Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you very much. Okay. I had a few questions about this, probably Mr. Tangi or maybe Mr. Becker-Legg, and I apologize if it was included in the detail that we were given. There were a couple things which weren't clear to me. I am in support of having some type of review done for the minimum mandatory payment being given to local governments. I understand from this motion, we are looking to become associate members to this organization. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And what other types of membership are available for this organization? Is it only the associate membership that they're offering at this time?
This is the only membership. The only other group that you would say has another status are those that are named in the lawsuit, and I guess they're the the plaintiff in the lawsuit against the state. So there are 14 communities across Michigan who have entered into a lawsuit against the city or are about to as plaintiffs. We would not be named as a plaintiff in the lawsuit, but we would be supporting their effort towards their investigation into underpayment of state shared revenue.
Okay. So now, should this lawsuit be successful and go in the plaintiff's favor, all cities in the state of Michigan will be eligible for revised payment, whether or not they had this associate membership or were part of the original suit or not. Is that correct or no?
That would be correct.
This membership fee of $1,500, is this a one-time fee?
It is.
Okay. One question. Attorney Becker, like, is there a specific case law that's supporting this particular this particular action being brought forth to the state? Is there something that we can reference here?
I've not read the pleadings, so I couldn't tell you what the legal theory is. Certainly, from a legal standpoint, the city can do what's being asked of it tonight. But in terms of what theory the plaintiffs are putting forth, I mean, they're going to somehow argue it's an unfunded mandate, but I'm not sure what case law they're necessarily relying on. I've not seen the pleadings, so.
Okay. The spirit of what this particular motion that we're being asked to do, I support. But I have some unanswered questions regarding it. I'm not sure this is the appropriate step for us to take as a community. You know, I just personally am not in support of doing this at this particular time.
Council, any further questions or comments? Mr. Kittle? Okay. Council, any further comments or questions? If not, I'm open for a motion for 7D.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, just before the motion, I just, it is documented, the math speaks for itself as far as how the Constitution for the state was written and how with the sales tax revenue, there's a portion of that supposed to be pushed down to local governments. And the math does indicate that, that the push down was short, if you will, across the entire state. So it does have, it is founded as far as it's, and with so many local governments struggling, as we know, it's the only way you could probably move the needle in Lansing.
That sounds like maybe even there could be something done out of court, but I don't know if that's the case,
Maybe.
if it's that straightforward. Yeah.
So with that, I would move to approve the membership agreement between the City of Auburn Hills and Taxpayers for Michigan Constitutional Government, and authorize the city manager to execute the agreement on behalf of the city and to effectuate the membership payment.
Support.
Moved by Mr. Kittle, supported by Mr. Knight. Is there any further discussion or comment? Madam Clerk, we're ready to vote.
Mr. Kittle?
Yes.
Mr. Knight?
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell?
No.
Ms. Verbecki?
Yes.
Mr. Burmeister?
Yes.
Ms. Hammond?
Yes.
Mayor McDaniel?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to old business, item 8A, it's a request for motion and public hearing for approval of IFEC extension for PHA USA. Good evening, City Assessor Griffin.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. We have before us a request from PH Automotive for an extension of their current IFT or IFEC, Industrial Facilities Exemption Certificate. The current certificate expires December 30th, 2016. They're requesting an additional 5 years for the real property portion only, which is $2.4 million. The tax abatement agreement extension for the agreement has been signed. It requires residency for an additional 4 years beyond the 5. At this point, staff recommends approval. We have Mr. Eugene Peck here from PH Automotive to answer any questions that you have, and we'll go forward from there.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Council, any questions for staff at this time? Good evening. Sir, is it Mr. Peck?
Yeah.
Mr. Peck, if you could just please introduce yourself and the title of the corporation in which you represent.
Members of council, my name is Eugene Peck. Good evening. I am the president of the North American operations for PHA USA. We're a tier 1 manufacturer supporting the U.S. OEMs here in this market.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being here this night, or this evening. Is there anything additional you would like to add as it relates to your IFEC extension?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Council, any questions for Mr. Peck? Mr. Knight?
What, I keep looking for, what was the length of the original abatement?
The original abatement was for 5 years.
And this request is for another 5.
An additional 5, under the current statute, they could request up to 7 years.
All set, Mr. Knight? All set?
I got the answer.
Okay, perfect.
Mr.
All
Mayor?
right, sure, Mr. Kittle.
If I'm reading this right, but there's the 4 years on the back end of this from a clawback standpoint?
Correct, yes.
Thank you.
If there aren't any further comments or questions, I'd be open for a motion. I'm sorry, you know what, before we do that. Public hearing open at 7:18. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, is there anyone wishing to speak on this item before we take a motion? If so, would you please come forward at this time? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing at 7:19. Now it's back before us for a motion. Mr. Knight?
I'm confused here. I'm thinking, I understand they have 5 years and that's ending, and they're asking for 5 years more. And of course, that can be allowed by the state. But our practice in the past is, except for 2 or 3 special ones, to go to 12. We have considered 8 to be a reasonable amount. And I recognize that people can come in and ask for 4 more, but I think a total of 8 years for this is a reasonable amount, and I'm not in favor of doing another 5 years. 3 years, yes, not 5.
Mr. Mayor?
Sure, Mr. Tangi.
I think what's a little confusing here is that originally when they came in, they would have been eligible for up to 8 initially, and then could have come back and asked for an additional 4 for a total of 12, and those are often granted. In their case, they originally asked for only 5 and not 8. So with the additional 5, they're essentially getting 10 rather than the 12 they could have been eligible to receive.
Correct, and this falls,
I understand that, and I mentioned that I'm not in favor of that particular approach on this particular one.
Okay,
And
but
it just, in our overall policy has been 8, and we made some exceptions, but there's been very few 12. And somehow, a year or so ago, got out, well, told everybody, yeah, come on in for 4 more if you got 8. And that one kind of snuck by me. But I'm not in favor of 12 years, and I'm not in favor of 10 at this point.
Mr. Mayor, we might be mixing apples and oranges here because the 12s that have been more rare were the 12s that we granted up front as special projects. It was not unusual for us to grant an 8 and have someone come back and ask for the extension. It's the extension in our new policy, which you're going to adopt tonight, which is that's going to be eliminated. As you'll recall, over the last month or so, I've been reminding council that there were a couple of companies that would be coming in who would still fall under the existing policy and would still kind of get in under the wire as far as an extension. This is one of the 2.
correct. Any further comments or questions?
Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Sure, Mr. Kittle.
So the total, all taxing entities, if I'm reading this correct, the benefit to the corporation is $155,000 and change.
Correct.
Correct.
So in the additional 5 years, we will, if this weren't granted, the city's portion would be $62,000, $63,000.
Correct.
And they're getting a 50%, so our portion is $31,780, as you have noted here, which is a little over $6,000 a year. Now, that's all millages, so that's not just operating, that's police, fire, everything rolled up, correct?
Correct.
The 31,000 is just the city.
Right, police, fire.
But it's full, it's the 10.56, which is now
Correct, yes,
11.34
yes.
or whatever, okay, all right. It's pretty cheap. So, all right, I just wanted to clarify it, but this does also fit within the parameters of our policy today.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? If not,
Your Honor,
sure, Ms. Mitchell.
I'm ready for a motion if there aren't any further questions or comments. Okay, the motion, and then I have a comment if it's seconded. Move to approve the request for an additional 5 years of real property abatement for PHA USA and IFEC 2011-466 by adopting the attached resolution.
Moved by Ms. Mitchell. Do we have support?
Support.
Supported by Mr. Burmeister. Is there any further discussion or comment?
Okay, Your Honor, so just a comment.
Sure.
I understand that we are going to be revisiting this policy later today, but the current rules, I think, are in place, and it's appropriate to evaluate the, the petitioner and the request by what we currently are following.
Correct. And then just to, Mr. Knight's point, I know that tax abatements have been a hot topic lately. And as Mr. Tangi had indicated, this would be this application was in essence accepted under the old policy. So
Yes, it was accepted under a policy that snuck by me a year ago. I think this one kind of, we'll just let everybody else come in for 4 more years. And I objected to that. That's what my point is. I don't think we had a policy that says you can come in and ask. It did not say it's automatic.
absolutely.
And I think that's what kind of the impression is here, that we promised, come in and we'll do it. And
No,
I'm just saying, I will vote no, because I believe 3 years is more prudent. I realize it's not a lot of money, but it is the principle of the thing.
No, I understand, and I don't think that, that staff was, portraying this to be an automatic. I mean, I think historically, if you look at the minutes, if you look at, the companies that have come before PHA, that, those that had gotten initial 8 were afforded the opportunity to come back and get 4, and in many cases, and maybe if not all cases, they were extended those additional 4 years. And so I think that the key takeaway here is that initially they didn't ask for 8, they asked for 5, and they're asking for 5 more. In essence, they're going to get 10, where if they could have gotten 12.
My implication is I probably forgot when we had some long drawn-out discussion about, we're just going to automatically go to everybody that wants to add 4 more years to 8. I just don't remember us ever really discussing. It was kind of, I think we were warned by the staff that they were looking at that. But I just really didn't think we ever bought into it, and I probably missed something there.
Mr. Mayor?
Sure, Mr. Tangi?
Just for clarification one more time, it was never automatic, and there is no policy that says it's automatic. And in fact, in the communications I've been sharing with council over the last month or two, as we were preparing a new tax abatement or tax incentive policy, I've made it very clear that no one has been promised an extension. The only thing that the policy does is it provides for an opportunity for a company to come back and request it. I think that there was a comment made by a broker some months ago that's sort of stuck in the craw of some people when they said, well, we just assume we come in here and get our abatements and extensions, and that message has never been delivered to the development community or the business community at large. The policy is the policy. You can come back and request. We never, as staff, tell someone they're assured or guaranteed they're getting an extension to their existing tax abatement.
And so just, what you would look to accomplish, Mr. Knight, I think many of us want to accomplish tonight, will be accomplished later on. This would just be the last one to come before this. So.
Oh, yes, I understand that. This is just a principal thing on the old policy.
Perfect.
That's all that I'm objecting to. I want to give them an abatement. I just don't want to give them 5 years.
I got you.
That's all.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
With that, we have a motion. We have a second. We are ready to vote.
Ms. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Burmeister?
Yes.
Ms. Hammond?
Yes.
Mr. Kittle?
No.
Mr. Knight?
No.
Ms. Verbecki?
Yes.
Mayor McDaniel?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Peck. Have a great evening.
Have
Thank
a great
you.
evening.
Council, moving on to new business, we have item 9A. It's a request for motion to approve a special land use permit for Unique Fabricating. Good evening, Director Cohen.
Mayor McDaniel, members of the City Council, this is a request from Unique Fabricating for special land use approval to allow the company to expand their existing outside storage area. This slide shows a comparison in size of the existing storage area and the proposed storage area, the existing on the left, the proposed on the right. The proposed storage area is essentially 4 times larger than what was approved back by the City Council back in 2004. To give you a feel for how we looked at this, back in July, we met with General Development and Unique Fabricating to figure out a way to properly screen the site. You see Bruce Brickman standing there in the center. He's 6 feet tall. One of the goals was we wanted to make sure the gaps between the trees were covered. The proposal was to do an 8-foot tall fence between the trees and replacing all the dead trees. This golf club that Mr. Brickman's holding up kind of shows what the 8-foot would look like. Essentially, the gaps that are between the trees where they've grown up will be covered by the fence. This was a key issue to make sure that you couldn't see through from Collier Road, and obviously more important, the higher ground, which is the residential property to the south. Here's a perspective of where the trees are and the fence to show, and also what the fence will look like to show how the vision is intended to block between the gaps. And here's another perspective view to show how the ground is much lower on the Unique Fabricating side, so that when someone views either from the homes on the south side, which is a higher ground, or from a vehicle on Collier Road, that you will not see the storage once the fence is installed. There was 2 issues that were raised at the Planning Commission. The primary issue was there was 4 residents, or more than 4 residents, that came to the Planning Commission meeting with concerns about noise at night related to operations. Unique Fabricating committed to those residents that they would not have any operations between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. It's my understanding the residents were satisfied with that solution. The other issue is that as staff and as the City Council historically, we would like to limit this permit to only Unique Fabricating. So this is a 4-year permit. It'll correspond with their existing lease that goes to 2020. We do not want the special land use to run with the land. A new user, if Unique Fabricating were to leave, we do not want that new user to have outside storage without another review. So that's the reason for the 4-year, is to match the lease term. Both the Planning Commission and City Council, or both the Planning Commission and staff, recommend approval of the project, and representatives from Unique Fabricating and General Development are here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Director Cohen. Council, any questions for staff at this time? Ms. Rebecki?
Thank you. Mr. Cohen, who came up with the 10 and 6 timeframes? That doesn't match anything else in our ordinance. I'm surprised we didn't go with 9 and 7, seeing as those are consistent time barriers, or times that we've requested no business to be conducted within our community.
I could allow Mr. Talent to explain the reasons for those time periods.
Okay, so you're answering the question that the developer, or that the owners are the ones, the leasers are the ones that came with the time frame?
I can answer that from a staff perspective. I could start with that, Ms. Vecchi, is that we want to work with the businesses based on the hours of operation that they have. Their third shift operates between 10 and 6. They've committed to not move things around or have music or things like that out of car radios going on in that time period. We want to help facilitate their operations. There's also another business next door that has a third shift situation. So working with the residents, it was agreed upon that 10 to 6 would be acceptable. That's how we move forward with that time period.
Okay, and this has been an ongoing issue. This is not something that's just occurred just now. This has been going on for years, right?
Well,
I guess it's a question.
I wouldn't say it's been going on for years. I mean, I've been involved in the project since 2000, when the lawsuit originally happened with the consent judgment. So
right.
We've been very sensitive as a community in working with the residents, had multiple public hearings working with them. General Development and Unique Fabricating actually spoke to the residents and asked them what time periods work for them. They all agreed that the 10 to 6 would work for them. So it's my understanding they're going to do their best to honor that, to make sure that they're good neighbors.
Okay, and then one other question before we move on to that. The trees that are dead that we continually have problems with, I don't know if you get complaints from the neighbors nearby, or why isn't Mr. Brickman just taking care of it? Why does he have to wait till we have a problem before it's taken care of?
Well, it's my understanding that they are going to take care of it, and I don't know if
It's
Mrs.
been going on
Fields
for
wants
years
to
again.
address
It's-
that. Stacy Fields is here with General Development, and she can answer that.
Good evening, ma'am. If I could just have you, before you address that question, just identify yourself with your name and the title of which corporation you
Sure,
represent.
my name is Stacy Fields, and I'm the asset manager for General Development Company. We're the owner and the landlord for Unique Fabricating. I've never received any complaints relative to the trees. It is in our policy to replace all dead trees, and we did replace 2 trees that were on site about 2.5 years ago. We also made a request for Unique Fabricating to have some of the trees cut up and some filler trees planted, which that was probably 3 seasons ago, and that was also completed, from what I understand. So this was all a matter of the screening, if it was going to go deeper into the parking lot, that we felt those trees needed to be added to be certain that it would be completely screened. While inspection on site, we did notice that there were 3 trees that we had not been notified about that were dead. And so those were going to be removed and filler trees replaced.
Yeah, there's quite a few that are thin in that area, and
Yeah.
they're either not alive or just not thriving. And so, and once you get closer to Joslin, when you're traveling maybe like eastbound, on Collier Road, from your end of your property going eastbound, it gets thinner as you get closer to Joslin, which makes sense because the noise is near the back of the building. I understand that. But I just feel like it needs to be fuller, and I'm surprised more residents are complaining because you can see all of the debris and the stuff in the backyard, the storage, and it continues to get to be a larger area, I think, for the storage. So, and I understand why you're coming forward with this. I will never support this with the hours that are being requested.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Rebecki. Council, any further questions for staff before I go ahead and introduce the petitioner? All right. Sir, if I could have you please just state your name for the record and the position and corporation in which you represent.
Yes, sir. My name is BJ Talent, Plant Manager, Unique Fabricating.
Okay, Mr. Talon, any questions for Mr. Talon? Ms. Hammond?
Yes. Are you operating 7 days a week?
No, ma'am, we do not. We're based on a 5-day operation right now.
Okay, so
We
there
do
is no
work some
weekend
Saturday.
operation.
We do work some Saturday work right now. We try not to work any weekend work at all, so.
All right, so no Sundays, though?
Very, very rarely we work on a Sunday. We actually pay double time on Sunday, so we definitely try to avoid that.
Okay, well, I struggled with the same thing as you, Ms. Verbecki, about the hours. I think that they should be more in line with what our policy states. And I realize that it cuts into your 3rd shift production, but we also have to be understanding of the neighbors there and the noise. And I would hope that if you're operating on Sundays, that there is none at all. And I think that that needs to be put in there too, that if they are running business on Sundays, since our policy states no machinery and all that running in the near the neighborhoods, that it should be in there.
Now, our 3rd shift operation does start Sunday night at 10 p.m., and I have already implemented a policy to where no outside noise, no hollows outside. We will keep the doors shut at night between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. We do have scheduled deliveries, scheduled pickups from GM at 6:45 in the morning. So that's the reason why we couldn't revert to the 7 a.m. time as well, so.
Mr.
I have a
Burma,
feeling-
one second.
Sorry.
Ms. Hammond, are you all set?
Yeah, I'm struggling with this.
Okay. I'll go ahead and move on to Mr. Burmeister.
I struggled too with the noise. During the planning commission, it was the residents who came up with that time frame. It wasn't them, or it wasn't Unique Fabricating, but it was the residents who requested that time.
Excuse me, can I ask a question? During the planning commission, was it ever told to the residents that our normal hours of operation for businesses is 9 and 7?
No, I don't believe it was told.
Okay.
There isn't a time period for a normal operation for businesses.
For construction, there is.
For construction.
So that's what I was just basing this on.
Okay.
No, but when this was forced on us, when we got stuck with this project, the residents were upset about it, and I think it's worked out fairly well with the residents who haven't complained too much. But I think that out of courtesy to these residents that live very close to this property, I mean, maybe 1,000, not even 1,000 feet. You might know how close they are.
Exact distance, but they're relatively close, yeah.
And to have 4 residents out of the small amount that are there, that's a pretty good percentage of people to show up at the meeting. So I'm surprised that many people showed up, so obviously there were some concerns.
Council, any further questions? Mr. Knight?
Beckerleg. The motion indicates an extension of the special land use.
Yes.
And for 4 years, and so on. Can we rehear this special land use? If we had complaints and problems in the neighborhood, can we call it back in
Yes.
and modify it?
You can call it back in, yes, you can.
That gives us the power, if the company doesn't listen, doesn't pay attention to what the objections are. I thought 9 o'clock was a better time because that's when kids have to go to bed to go to school. But as long as we have the hammer, so that if they aren't good citizens, we can go after them, I'm satisfied to support it because I know they'll make special effort to be good citizens because they know that, if it's a problem, we can reconsider it.
Right,
So
special land uses do not run with the land, so you've got the opportunity, if for whatever reason they don't comply with any special land use conditions, to bring them back before you to explain the reasons.
Thank you, Mr. Beckerleg. Council, any further comments or questions? Mr. Kittle?
Sir, can you just remind me what you guys manufacture?
We manufacture sound dampenings and insulators, mainly automotive.
So,
It's foam, plastic, polyethylene, polyurethane, stuff like that. We don't actually manufacture, we just converters of it. So we actually buy the raw good in, and then we convert it into a finished good.
for the automotive industry?
Yes, sir.
And you're not banging out K-frames or control arms
No,
or
sir.
anything? It's strictly soft manufacturing more or
That
less?
is correct.
And with the auto industry running the way it's been, I mean, with the annual sales numbers, you guys were running a lot of overtime. Now with the industry softening a little bit, subsequently, your Saturdays and Sundays are retracting a little bit.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
So ideal operations at the plant were probably 2 shifts. I mean, from a capacity standpoint, utilization, it was probably 2 shifts, 5 days a week?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Kittle. Council, any further comments or questions? I guess, I mean, I can appreciate, I think Ms. Hammond made a comment, and is also Ms. Rebecki, in terms of the time frame, 10 to 6 versus 9 to 7. You know, the thing that, for me, that makes me comfortable with this is the fact that, you know, we went through the process. We had a public hearing, we had our planning commission look at it, you know, members of our residential community were engaged in this. We had four residents that came forward, and they were in essence agreement of this. So the other thing that Mr. Knight made a comment about was that we in essence can come back and look at this again if things get out of hand or don't go as we had anticipated. So for those 2 reasons, you know, for me, I'm comfortable with this, and I'm okay in terms of what is being recommended from staff standpoint. So if there aren't any further comments or
Mr.
questions.
Mayor?
yeah, I was just going to comment.
Mr. Knight, and then I'll go to Ms.
This, Mr. Beckley, this, if there was a conversation about trees, and if they died, you know, replacing them, we can always call that back to require that if it gets bad that way.
That's also
Can we
correct.
not?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, okay. In other words, we can modify if we need to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. Ms. Rebecki.
Yeah, I know this is out of your control a little bit, but as a courtesy, could you please ask your drivers to stop cutting off all the drivers on Joslyn Road when they're coming out of your facility, traveling northbound? I saw an almost accident again today, this morning at around 7 a.m., 7:30 a.m., when another truck came over, pulled out of your property and went like 5 lanes across the road. So I know it's not you, you know, but if it would be nice if you could just remind them to be cautious on Joslyn Road when they're pulling out.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely, no problem with that. I will have my logistics superintendent take care of that for us tomorrow.
Mr. Burmeister.
Mr. Cohen, I don't know if you can answer this off the top of your head, but I don't remember exactly what is our time or our noise ordinance relations to the time? Is it 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.? Is that just for construction use? Or Mr. Beckerleg, I don't know if you can shed some light on
I
that?
believe the ordinance that's being discussed is the construction activity ordinance, so it doesn't specifically apply to this. I think it's, people are making the analogy to it. It wouldn't specifically apply to this.
Mr. Burmeister, there's a consent judgment that governs this property. And for instance, trash pickup is supposed to be between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. they were a little bit stricter than our normal requirements. Also, alarms on buildings couldn't be beyond 7 and 7. So there was a consent judgment related to the development of these 3 parcels.
Okay, at the planning commission, I was trying to read through the noise ordinance, and I thought it only affected the construction phase or anybody doing construction.
That's correct.
Okay. I guess, just one last thing. I think the important thing is that, everyone's come to the table here and they've agreed on something. And if for whatever reason that does not end up being, we can always look at this again and fix it. So I think that might set some comfort level with some council members here. So if there aren't any further comments or discussion, I'd be open for a motion for the approval of the special land use permit.
I'll move to accept the Planning Commission's recommendation and approve the expansion of the outside storage area and the 4-year extension of the previous approved special land permit for Unique Fabricating Incorporated, subject to the conditions of the Planning Commission and Administrative Review Team.
Moved by Mr. Knight. Do we have support?
Support.
Supported by Mr. Burmeister. Is there any further discussion or comment? Madam Clerk, we are ready to vote.
Mr. Knight?
Yes.
Mr. Burmeister?
Yes.
Ms. Hammond?
Yes.
Mr. Kittle?
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell?
No.
Ms. Verbecky?
No.
Mayor McDaniel?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Talon. Ms. Fields, have a great evening.
You too.
Thank you.
Moving on, under new business, we have 9B. It's a request for motion regarding a special assessment district, step 1 for Deep Woods Drive. Director Melcher, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor McDaniel and members of City Council. The next 3 agenda items will be related to the assignment of a special assessment district for road projects that are scheduled to be constructed in 2017. First one here is Deepwood Drive. The owner representatives, there are 3, have agreed to the terms of the special assessment district, and they will, as Mr. Becker-Legg formalizes that agreement, they will be executing it. Once that agreement is executed, we'll bring it back to City Council for review and approval. Once the agreement is executed by all the parties, it will become a contract and will fulfill the special assessment district procedure as outlined in the special assessment ordinance. At this time, I'd like to introduce Bernie Sins. He is the Vice President of Business Operations representing Herotech America. Stacy Fields is also here. She's asset manager, and she introduced herself earlier for General Development Company. And Tim Griswold, representing Renishaw, he's the operations manager, could not be in attendance tonight, but was hoping to attend. Many members of staff are here to answer any questions you have, so we're prepared at this time.
Thank you, Director Melcher. Council, any questions for staff at this time? All right. I do see that we have Mr. Sins and Ms. Fields in attendance. Is there anything that either of you two would like to add or comment on? If so, okay. With that, Council, if there aren't any questions or comments, I'd be open for a motion for the approval of the resolution.
Your Honor,
Ms. Mitchell.
I move to approve resolution number 1 to proceed with the preparation of plans, specification, and cost estimates for proposed special assessment districts regarding the repair of and improvements to Deepwood Drive.
Moved by Ms. Mitchell. Do we have support?
Support.
Supported by Ms. Hammond. Any further discussion or comment?
I have a question.
Sure,
Mr.
Mr.
Mayor.
Kittle.
So it says to proceed with the preparation of plans, specifications, and cost estimates for the proposed SAD district regarding the repair and improvements of Deepwood Drive. So this doesn't actually kick off the project. This is the planning.
Correct.
And cost estimating.
This is step 1.
Thank you.
Correct. Sir, are you standing at the podium for this particular item, or is it the
I am.
next one?
I understood that we could make a comment, so I guess.
Okay, so are you here from another SAD? Are you regarding another SAD project?
No. I don't think so. I'm here for the
Ye-
North Atlantic SAD project.
Okay, so I have not called.
Mr. Mayor?
Sir.
This is Don Bailey. He is representing Suburban Tool. He will be able to comment for the SAD item, North Atlantic Boulevard Continental, which
That's
is coming up on
So
the
I will call you up
agenda.
at 9D, correct. Two more, so I will call you up at that time. Mr. Knight?
There was an interesting question raised. Now, to develop the estimates and do that stuff, I assume Orchard Hills McClimate will be doing it, or we doing it internally? Where does the money come from for that? Is that something we had advanced to pay for that? And then if it goes through, reimbursed?
That is correct. That's exactly what happens. You've already actually approved a competitive bid process for OHM to do this work. The thing that is unique about this one versus perhaps the others is that they are entering into an agreement, so they are not going to go through an SAD process. This just initiates the estimates, and then they'll enter into a contract, and they will not be going through a long, more drawn-out process.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. Council, any further comments or questions? Ready for a motion? Ready to vote?
Ms. Mitchell?
Yes.
Ms. Hammond?
Yes.
Mr. Kittle?
Yes.
Mr. Knight?
Yes.
Ms. Verbecki?
Yes.
Mr. Burmeister?
Yes.
Mayor McDaniel?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. 9C, request for motion for Special Assessment District Step 1 for Pacific Drive. Director Melcher.
Good evening once again. Adopting resolution number 1 tonight will begin the SAD procedure for construction of Pacific Drive. Not all of the property owners agreed to the terms of the SAD, and therefore we are bringing this forward to begin the procedure. The main disagreement is a dispute over the equal division of cost per the property owners. I would like to at this time introduce Kevin Nahila. He is the ATC Engineer Director for Autoleave. I don't believe there are any other businesses or property owners represented here for Pacific at this time. Okay, Sam Ashley for Hayden Company.
All right, thank you, Director Melcher. Council, at this time, any questions for staff? Okay. We have Mr. Nahila, is that how you? Nahila. Sir, is there anything that you wish to add at this time? You can please come forward. Okay. Mr. Ashley, anything you wish to add, sir? Please come forward at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, we are taking public comment during these special assessment districts. We do ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Again, my name is Sam Ashley. I'm with Cunningham Limp here on behalf of the landowner of the Hayden Auburn LLC property. Our client actually was one of the folks that their site's 3.6 acres. It's undeveloped currently. As it related to the proportional cost splitting, their concern is primarily that it's being divided, total cost, 8 shares. Their position is such that they want to reconsider a different splitting and share of it to be based on a pro rata of the total acreage.
Okay, thank you, sir, for your comment.
Thank you.
Council, any questions again for staff? If there aren't any, I'd be open for a motion for 9C.
This is
Mr. Kittle?
I would move to approve resolution number 1 to proceed with the preparation of plan specifications and cost estimates for the proposed special assessment district regarding the repair of and improvements to Pacific Drive.
Second.
Pacific. All right, moved by Mr. Kittle, supported by Ms. Mitchell. Comment, Mr. Kittle?
Just, again, to proceed with the preparation of plans, specifications, and cost estimates.
has been added to the motion. Is the,
That's in the motion, but I
Correct.
wanted to reemphasize.
excellent. Any further comments or questions? We're ready to vote.
Mr. Kittle?
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell?
Yes.
Ms. Verbecky?
Yes.
Mr. Burmeister?
Yes.
Ms. Hammond?
Yes.
Mr. Knight?
Yes.
Mayor McDaniel?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. 9D, request for motion for Special Assessment District Step 1 for North Atlantic and Continental. Director Melcher.
Pretty much the same information, Mr. Mayor. The major dispute here and opposition of some of the property owners is just outright do not feel that they should have to participate in this assessment district. I'm sure that Mr. Bailey, representing Suburban Tool, will expand on that some.
All right, thank you, Mr. Melcher. Do you know if there's any other corporations represented this evening on North Atlantic or Continental for this portion of the SAD?
Just Samsung Corporation is represented here tonight as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bailey, at this time, you could please come forward to the podium. Again, ladies and gentlemen, we are taking public comment during the SAD Step 1 process, and we are limiting comments to 3 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. My name again is Don Bailey, Suburban Tool. Been there for 21 years, and it's been a wonderful community. The issue that we have today with an SAD is a little confusing to me, and I don't quite understand exactly why we're taking an SAD approach. As I recall, when the property was developed, and we were the first building in that SAD area, that was 21 years ago, and the road was built by the developer at that time under an SAD. The SAD was, the road was then dedicated to the city for $0, so the city didn't pay for the road in the first time. Now, an SAD, as I understand it, is to enhance the property values. There seems to be an opinion that the property values will be enhanced merely by the repaving of the property, and I don't think there's any data to support that, first of all. Secondly, it was presented to us that the road was used principally by the owners of the property and the businesses on North Atlantic and Continental. I'd like to point out that that's not true at all. When there is an event at the Palace, the road is blocked off at Harmon and North Atlantic, and the traffic is diverted down North Atlantic, thousands of cars, mind you. They go down that road over to Brown Road. So the theory that we are the only ones that use that road just does not apply. So in my view, an SAD for this purpose does not make any sense. There are other issues that I would take as well. Taylor Road was recently developed, and I do not believe that that was done under an SAD, and yet it's the same situation there. We have businesses there that may be dedicated to that road, but on the other hand, there's a lot of local traffic there as well. So I don't understand how this council or the city can differentiate between Taylor Road, as an example, and North Atlantic. The theory that North Atlantic, again, is only used by the businesses in that area is just not true. I would suggest that, and I'd like to know where the city, has obtained the other $1.7 million, because it's projected that it's going to be $3.4 million. That's an estimate. My guess is it will probably go up, because that was a comment that was made to us, so that's a rough estimate. The city found $1.7 million to pay for half of it. I guess I'd like to know where those funds came from, and could the other $1.7 million come from the same area, whether it's a bond or whatever it is. There are other issues that I have too, but that I think they would only come into being as if this SAD were passed, and one of those would be the method in which the payments are being divided.
Okay, Mr. Bailey, you have 10 seconds.
Time's up?
Time's up, sir.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Council, any questions for staff at this time regarding the Special Assessment District proposed for North Atlantic and Continental?
Mr. Mayor, will any of his questions be addressed, or are they for the record?
They're for the record, unless you have the information to address that. All of this communications with all the businesses in that area have been in constant communication with Director Melcher, and the information's been shared.
Do you mind if I answer a couple of things?
If you'd like, yeah.
So, a couple, is it Mr. Bailey, is that? All right. Where the 1.7 million comes from, it's out of general fund. And that's a savings account that we've set aside when we had revenues over expenditures for a number of years. The economic condition for local governments across the state has changed dramatically and is continuing to worsen. Subsequently, the lawsuit that we agreed to become a member of, as we spoke earlier. The problem that we have is the vast majority of roads that are across the city constitute many more 1.7 millions here and there. So we're trying to disperse the funds in a manner that A, allows us to have a great infrastructure for safety and other purposes in the city while balancing the available funds. Our overall taxable value some 7 years ago was $2.6 billion, which this year now goes down to 1.5. So our overall taxable value, which times the millage rate that we collect on, is $1.1 billion less than it was in its peak, and that's largely as a result of the recession that we went through, Proposal A in Headley, which limits the amount of tax recapture that you can go up. We were losing property values of 10, 15, 20% a year for 7 years, or for several years, and it can only go up at the CPI rate, which was 0.9% in the last year. So we're just not generating the revenue based on our investments that we once did. So subsequently, there's less money to go around, so we're asking people for help, quite frankly. If you really wanted to help too, you could start writing some letters up to Lansing and start suggesting that these guys lighten up on the squeeze that they're putting on local governments so that we can actually get the revenue that we're supposed to get in order to deliver the quality of services that you've grown to expect. Personally, if I were in your shoes, I'd be pretty ticked off as well, having been one of the first communities in there, and I do struggle with this. And quite frankly, I bring it up later in comments. I mean, if a company that's been there, that's lived through all sorts of abatements versus somebody that hasn't, I think there should be some consideration towards that as we do calculate these things. And that's why I'm agreeing to work on the preparation of plans, specifications, and cost estimates. But to me, that's the beginning. We do need to understand what those are.
Thank you, Mr. Kittle. And I'd just add, that, keep in mind, many communities, when they do these special assessments of this type of improvement, they do it with 100% of the cost to the property owners. And so, we here at the city have made a policy decision from a council standpoint to do 50% match. So I just wanted to make mention of that, the city, again, will be contributing 50% of the cost when we, in essence, could have adopted a policy that would make it 100% of the cost onto the business community. And as Mr. Kittle had so eloquently put, it's the combination of the taxable value, the elimination of personal property revenue, and the economic incentives within our business community that have led us and aligned us to create the circumstances that is, in essence, bringing this project in terms of these SADs forward today.
Mr. Mayor?
Ms. Verbecki.
In regards to one of Mr. Bailey's questions or comments, North Atlantic Boulevard, I don't see a map in here explaining exactly what area this is going to include. Is it the whole street?
Yes, the entire road, North Atlantic Boulevard and Continental Drive. It's one project.
And so every single property that is near it, North Atlantic Boulevard is connected to this SAD then?
Any property that fronts those roads.
Okay. Thank you.
Council, any further comments or questions? Do we have a motion? At this time, be open for motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd make the same motion. To approve resolution number 1 to proceed with the, am I still on the right one? Yeah. Preparation of plan specifications and cost estimates for proposed special assessment district regarding the repair and improvements to North Atlantic Boulevard and Continental Drive.
Moved by Mr. Kittle. Do we have support?
Second.
Supported by Ms. Mitchell. Is there any further discussion or comment? We are ready to vote.
Mr. Kittle?
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell?
Yes.
Ms. Verbecki?
Yes.
Mr. Burmeister?
Yes.
Ms. Hammond?
Yes.
Mr. Knight?
Yes.
Mayor McDaniel?
Yes,
We have a motion carries.
thank you. We do have a forum. Or a quorum. All right, council, moving on, finishing up new business 9E. You know what, I apologize. I did not give an opportunity for Samsung to speak. Did you have anything, sir? Okay, thank you. Request for motion to approve the amendment to the city's property tax incentive policy. City Manager Tangi.
Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, earlier this month, you reviewed the tax incentive review policy in depth, actually, in a workshop that was presented on October 10th. I'm not going to rehash all of this memo. As you can see in the memo, there was a summary of changes to our tax incentive review policy that appear in this memo dated October 11th, 2016. These amendments were added to the policy, and the policy is before you this evening for adoption. I suppose for the record, I could run through these. The changes to the policy in general: set a minimum investment threshold for tax incentives for real property at $2 million. They eliminate tax incentives for personal property, which obviously aligns with the law, which does not tax personal property. Reduce the length of tax incentives to 4, 6, and 8 years based on the set investment levels. Eliminated the special projects provision, since tax incentive length will be based on set investment levels. Increased the business residency clawback requirements. Eliminated extensions for existing and future tax incentives, and discontinues the tax incentive review subcommittee. So with that, you have a motion before you for the adoption of the policy.
Thank you, Mr. Tangi. Council, is there any questions for Mr. Tangi or Mr. Beckerleg? If not, I'd be open for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I don't have any questions, but
Sure.
can I make a couple comments?
Absolutely.
And this kind of coincides with the special assessment districts too, looking to revamp our tax incentive policy. And, you know, I mean, there's a couple of schools of thought on this thing that we debated pretty extensively. You know, we could go adopt the old Nancy Reagan philosophy and just say no. But there certainly are some economic benefits to offering some incentive to the corporation. And while I'm probably the toughest on this, or have been more vocal, this is a substantial difference and is a step in the right direction, perhaps not the panacea. You know, my personal struggle with this is that if I were a corporation that were going to come in here and spend, you know, $10 million or whatever the number is that qualifies under the new steps, only to be then approached later to say, oh, by the way, we want you to pay 50% of the road improvements, I almost think that we should offer them on the front end, you know, if you want to opt out of this, you know, you could potentially not have to be included in that later, or somehow, you know, find some means to not put the burden on them or us. You know, I still struggle with this. I'm going to support it tonight because I think it's a huge improvement over what we have, but I do think that we've got a longer-term major road funding issue that we have to address in some other way. I don't think the 50% SADs is going to necessarily handle it, and certainly abating taxes that could be used for that purpose is somewhat counterintuitive as well.
Thank you, Mr. Kittle. Council, is there any further comment? Mr. Knight?
I move to adopt the city property tax incentive policy as amended, effective October 24, 2016. Current applications for FEV, Martinrea, and ABB processed in coordination with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation may proceed under the formal policy, i.e., allowable 8 years tax incentive with required 2-year business residency. And that should say with the required additional 2 years business residency, provided said applications are completed and become effective by December 31st, 2017.
Moved
I
by,
do want the word in there where it says with the required additional 2 years. I want that word in there because it just says 2 years residency, and want to make sure that's clear.
clerk has noted that. Moved by Mr. Knight. Do we have support?
Second, and I have a question.
Supported by Ms. Mitchell. Ms. Mitchell.
Okay, so there were some businesses mentioned in this motion. Should their applications not be complete or effective by December 31st, 2017, what will happen at that point?
They will be reviewed under the new policy.
Okay, and that's completely understood by those businesses?
That's completely understood. Many of these coming in have been notified that we are changing our policy. I do want to clarify something because I think the correction made on the 2 years actually makes it incorrect. The 2-year business residency is the definition, a 2-year. By saying additional 2 year, you're making that sound like the expectation is 4 years. It is just a 2-year residency policy. If you say an additional 2 years, it's almost like saying 4. I think the language is correct.
Are you okay with that, Ms. Mitchell?
Let me think about that. Say that one more time, Mr. Tangi. No, just kidding. I'm comfortable with it. Don't say another word.
Any further comments or questions or discussion? Madam Clerk, we're ready to vote.
Mr. Knight?
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell?
Yes.
Ms. Verbecki?
Yes.
Mr. Burmeister?
Yes.
Ms. Hammond?
Yes.
Mr. Kittle?
Yes.
Mayor McDaniel?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on, item 10 is comments and motions from council. Ms. Hammond.
Just one quick one, and I brought it up to Mr. Tangi last week, I believe, when I was speaking with him. We're still watering the flower paths downtown, even in the rain. I thought that the pipes were all being drained and we were stopping that, but I've noticed they've still been going.
Mr. Director Melcher, is there anything you can add regarding that, or just have staff take a look at it?
We'll take another look at it. I believe it's to water the mums, which is a seasonal flower, that to keep them looking nice and beautiful throughout the fall season. That's the idea, but take another look at it.
Okay, I think that they're thriving fairly well, and I think that's just kind of a waste of water at this point.
Just for clarification, Director Melcher, we have rain sensors in that portion, or no?
Not in that portion of the city.
Okay. All set, Ms. Hammond? All right. Mr. Kittle?
I just two. One was, I just wanted to make a comment that I think the Tifa parking, renting those spaces at $30 is pretty cheap. So I would hope that we keep an eye on that and look at, some kind of market rates that might insinuate that they're worth more. And then, again, I had this comment down before even the dialogue came up towards the end of the meeting here, that the whole special assessment district thing, I think we have to look at considerably. Particularly, I do encourage us to have that workshop with some bond counsel again and look at our options relative to leveraging our financial position, as strong as it is today, which is, weakening, but it still is quite healthy considering what most local governments are at, and I think we need to consider leveraging that.
Thank you, Mr. Kittle. Mr. Knight?
First, I would hope that we would continue to try and recruit as many people as possible to really raise a fuss with the state, not only in what this was, but to reimburse those that give abatements to some degree. Because as Bob has pointed out many times, we carry the load of abatements, and the state gets the sales tax, all the other taxes that come from them, and they do throw a little money out, but they throw it out to the petitioners, and they don't do anything for the particular cities and townships that are supporting it. So we need to strategize how to get other people involved and really make some fuss over that abatement thing so that we're reimbursed partially for doing the favor of helping the state draw people.
Mr. Knight, if that was a comment to I just want to go, since I'm on my soapbox, I might as well go up one more stair, is that, I mean, if there were two things that we could fix in the state, I mean, one would be to get rid of the Headley amendment, and the second would be to get rid of term limits. I mean, come November 9th, there's going to be 42 state representatives voted in, new first-timers that are, out of a field of 110. So all the guys that have been there for their 3 2-year terms that are now going to move over and try to run for the Senate so that they can get their 2 4-year terms there, it's just, they all have to be re-educated. So 42 new ones are absolutely clueless as far as what's going on with local units and how they're funded and all that. So it starts all over again. So with the lobbyists that, we have from the MML and the other associations that work up there and our own people, we start right back at square one. So anyhow.
I also agreed, Bob, with your earlier comments about the balance between SEDS and abatements and so on. We need to do some strategizing and that over the next time. The next item, I just want to dwell on it for just a minute. I was really interested in the comment on our Bluegrass Festival and the cost and so on. And I think that we do a great job of publicizing the community with it. But I agree 100%. It's time to find hotels or shopping centers or businesses to make up the shortfall and even give the city a couple $1,000 for doing all the work to do it. So it's one of these things that we're saying, we're talking about the new budget review group. But I'm interested in hearing, in the next few weeks, attitudes toward that. Another one, I've already said to Brian about Concert in the Park. I missed one this year. Got to all the others, did the count every week. We have a good following, but we make no effort to allow them to contribute. Most of those folks down there, the couples would throw $5 in the pot. I'm not suggesting charging. I'm suggesting having a volunteer bottle or something and going to some of the nonprofits and letting them do a 50-50 raffle with, and so on, in some way. And so I'm saying, I think it's bringing up the bluegrass has really got my attention on these various things and figuring out how we can do the good things that do the things. But we've had 200, 300 at the most on our concerts in the parks. It's basically the same people. A third to a half are from outside the city. They do buy a few things downtown. And so it's a good thing. And with the new amphitheater coming, next year, I'd like to see us putting out, support the concert series and let people put $5 bills in voluntarily and do some things. So I just throw out a couple of things, but we need to be thinking about all kinds of innovative ways that way, so that where people really are poor and need our help, we can do that. But where people are just coming, they prevent the bill. And the last thing I want to do is I didn't bring it up in the budget thing, but I keep mentioning it. I'd like to see us set aside $40,000 to $60,000 that this council gives to various community organizations so that we don't have to use block grant money, which is decreasing and there's never enough to go around, and we don't give enough out to those who are carrying a load. The neighborhood house just opened their new things, and I know what they're doing, and they had their report a year ago of how many bus rides they had and so on. And so I'm still laboring that some of you will catch the spirit and say, We, as a council, need to do that. We can't depend on the community fund to necessarily do that, because they don't necessarily have the same priorities. So I'd like to see us think about setting aside some money. We allow the various people who have a story to tell that are really having an impact, where we can spend $1 and we get $5 back, so that we can fund them, because it directly reduces our cost. End of sermon.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. Mr. Burmeister?
Two quick ones. Mr. Melchert, the mums downtown look beautiful. Usually I don't pay too much attention to the flowers, but I drove through there the other night and they were gorgeous.
Thank you.
The other thing is the Fall Festival. I've heard numerous comments on how good it was and that they really enjoyed it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Burmeister. Ms. Verbecki?
Thank you. Two quick things also. Just wanted to remind everybody that this Thursday is trick-or-treating with the community center, I believe 6 to 7. I don't know if anybody can, is that 6 to 7:30? Thank you. My kid's favorite event, so we'll be there. Hope to see everybody out. And then on Saturday downtown, there's also trick-or-treating. I think we call it the Spooktacular now. So, yeah. Okay, so see you there also. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell?
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of items. In addition to the Autumn Fun that Councilmember Verbecki mentioned, the Boys and Girls Club will also have their Halloween party on October the 31st. And Legoland is having Brick or Treat now through the end of the month, which is a scavenger hunt to find pumpkins in their mini Detroit display, so you may want to check that out. And then on another note, I was pleased to see that the average daily attendance at the Den has doubled. So great to know that that facility is being utilized by the students and the community members in the area. And also wanted to thank staff for the update that they provided regarding Main Street, Oakland. I appreciated that detail. Would like to get a follow-up to the request I made on October 15th regarding the video from our city council meeting on September the 12th. I had a couple of residents communicate to me that they were not able to view that online. They couldn't find it. So I'm not sure if it was uploaded and taken down, but if we could look at that and look at having it put back up on the website, I'd appreciate that. And then also I saw at one of our authority meetings that one of the members talked about the potential of using 4K cameras to live stream our meetings, and said that there wasn't a lot of cost associated with that. I don't know, but I would like to have that investigated to see if that might also be an option that we could pursue. And then lastly, just thank you to everyone that attended my coffee hour earlier this month. I always appreciate the conversation from the residents.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell. And I would just have one, I'd be remiss to say, since we do have the chairman of the Chamber Board, Mr. Sins, in attendance this evening, that I just want to congratulate you and the new executive director, who we all were fortunate to meet, at least for myself, the first time, I believe, Jean Jernigan, I believe is how she pronounces it. Great job to all of the staff there. Really, congratulations to an awesome and well-attended event. So I wanted to pass that on. City Attorney's report. City Manager's report.
Well, you shortened my report. You stole some of my thunder. I was going to mention Jean. Jean Jernigan is the new director of the Chamber of Commerce. She comes to us from the Michigan Association of Certified Public Accountants, where she was a vice president. And I just wanted to also welcome her to the Auburn Hills community. I also wanted to congratulate the Rochester Area Neighborhood House. They were mentioned earlier. They moved into their new home in Rochester Hills. The Neighborhood House is a nonprofit that serves area residents who need a hand up, and Auburn Hills and its residents are fortunate to be a recipient of their services. I want to send my best wishes to their executive director, Kathy Lisinski, and her staff. Also wanted to mention that if you need to or would like to learn more about Rochester Area Neighborhood House, you can do so by visiting them at their website, which is www.ranh.org. As an update, as you know, the citizens of Auburn Hills approved a millage increase in August. to adequately fund the fire department. Much of that new funding, which will be, begin to be collected in 2017, is to add personnel to the department to provide coverage in all 3 of our fire stations. I wanted to take this opportunity to report back to the citizens that we are well underway with hiring the necessary staff and expect to have all of our new hires on board within the next 2 to 3 months. This should begin to translate into service delivery improvement, most specifically in response times. I want to thank Chief Manning and Assistant Chief Macias for their leadership. Want to congratulate Encore Automation on their expansion and ribbon cutting last week, and also to Martin Rea on the groundbreaking of their new 108,000 square foot U.S. headquarters on Updike next to the recently built GKN building. And just for clarification, again, I don't want to repeat, but Halloween Trail this Thursday here at the Civic Center Park, 6 to 7:30 p.m. And Spooktacular is our downtown merchant event. That is this Saturday, October 29th, from noon to 1:30 p.m. Both are great family fun and are free to participants. And if you'd like more information on either of those 2 events, you can find them on our main page at www.auburnhills.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tanji. With that,
And
sure,
then for just a
absolutely.
minute, on the 31st, or on the Halloween, the Boys and Girls Club will have their probably 40th or 45th annual activity at 7 to 8:30 for the kids of the community to keep them off the street after they've done begging. So that's one more activity that's available for those that are seeing it on the tape or something to remind them that the Boys and Girls Club are doing that. Also on Saturday, as was mentioned, Avondale Youth Assistance and the senior leadership group at the high school will be putting on pumpkin painting and cookie decorating at the station number 1 as part of the downtown activities, so that kids can collect the candy and go over and do an activity.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. And one last thing, because I do know that this comes up on Halloween evening, is trick-or-treating, and maybe Lieutenant Gagnon, correct me if I'm wrong, is in Auburn Hills between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m.
That's correct.
Thank you. So for all those listening, 6 to 7 p.m. at my house, you can come until 6:15. So with that will be a motion for an adjournment, moved by Mr. Kittle, supported by Mr. Burmeister. All in favor?
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned.